Hi, Denny. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. Can I ask you, what does board leadership mean for you? And how did you know that you were being called to be a leader in the church?
That's a really interesting question because this is not my first time being the board chair. Shortly after we moved here, I became chair of the finance team. It was just something that people said, we'd like for you to try this. And so I said, if that's where I can serve, that makes sense for me. It's something I know or something I'm comfortable with. So I have to say I've never really felt called to leadership. That's never really been a goal. The goal's never been to be a leader. I phrase it for myself as I've been called to serve, and I serve in areas that I'm at least perceived to be good at. And so that's where this thing comes from for me, is if I'm able to serve, if I'm able to help people, if I'm able to facilitate what needs to be done, then that's a role that I'm happy to fill.
You're willing to serve in that capacity. I love that.
This is your first time serving?
Yes, this is.
So what made you decide to say yes when you got asked to do this job?
I was a little bit nervous because I didn't really know what board leadership would mean, or I didn't know what it would look like. I did not take the decision lightly at all. I prayed about it, and I just felt like the Lord was really giving me the green light, go for it.
When you went through that decision process, what did you think you were being called to do?
Because there's so many youth at this church, I'd want to be a representation of the young people of Azure Hills Church.
So how would you go about that?
Just being present, honestly, throughout decisions and, board activities. Because I'm very close and active with the youth here, I'm able to get their opinions and take them to the board.
How are you going to interact with them so that you get a feel for what it is that moves them or connects them or what they're lacking?
I've been in their position, as high schoolers. Like, high schoolers go through so much. I'm not going to say that I know everything that they go through, but I have a feeling and a sense of what might be going on in their spiritual lives and other aspects of their lives as well. I'd say I just pay attention to those things, and then also I ask them, like, how can I serve you? How can we as like a youth group, how can we serve you? How can we pour into you? So really creating that space for the students to really let you know and vocalize their needs is very crucial, and I do value that.
When you're doing that, do you find people that you don't get to talk too much or they don't participate? How do you draw them back in?
It's tricky when you see a student on the sidelines or distancing themselves away from the church. But I think before you yourself do anything, like, it's important to pray for that person, because at the end of the day, you don't know if that person experienced, hurt in the church, or if they experienced, something that caused them not to want to engage with other students. I pray, I'm like, God, this is your child. I don't know how to speak to them. Give me the words to speak to them and to encourage them to find, community in this space.
You mentioned earlier when we were talking, maybe off camera, about not having attended for a while and then coming back. What was it that brought you back? How do you take what you went through and make that work for them?
Yeah, so when I was 16, almost 17, I felt a deep conviction from the Holy Spirit saying, let's start making an effort to be in community. And I had never been in a youth group before, and so I didn't know what that looks like. Youth groups kind of intimidated me, but I felt a conviction to join a community where leaders could just pour into me spiritually and I could just learn more. That was my wake-up call for coming back. And then also Pastor Nick, he really reached out to me, and we did Bible studies. And so little by little, I just started getting familiar and comfortable with the youth, and I think that's what brought me back in. And looking back, I'm just ever so grateful.
I like that. So we've said for generations that the youth are the future of our church.
Right.
When I was a youth, I was told that.
Yeah.
How do we put those words into better action so that it becomes part of our culture and not just something that we say for every new group of youth?
I hold so much value to youth mentorship. If we could just have people walk alongside, these students, people that are willing to hear them out, hear them on their doubts, and not shame them for having those doubts, people that could take the time to explain, in this case, Adventism. Like, what does that mean? Why do we worship on Saturday? Like, why do we do these things? I think that would be a good way to make space for the youth and to serve them in that way.
So you mentioned just a bit ago about hurt. Tell me more about what you're talking about when you talk about hurt.
I'd say when people leave the church because they've been hurt by
what people have said to them, or about
conflict.
them.
Yes,
or...
in both, I'd say. Yeah.
And when you say conflict, you mean face to face, in your face, yelling.
It could be. Yeah, it could be.
We always talk about the youth are our future, and then we bemoan how we lose them. I went to a 50th high school reunion, and out of a graduating class of 100 from the boarding school that I went to, there's less than half of the people that are still active in churches. So this is not something that's new.
Right.
It's not something that's exclusive to generations, but it starts with the youth.
Right.
And it's really then on us to figure out how to reach them. Who do we need to be as leaders so that they feel involved, feel that this is home, feel that this is their community? How do we get young people like you to say, people cared for me, I felt that, I knew that this was a place for me?
Every church is full of variety of people in different seasons, so I'd say just being more vocal about the defects of some of the areas of ministry and just being open about it.
You mentioned doubt, and is it so maybe if I use that as an example, it's okay to, in fact, maybe beneficial for young people to hear from old folks that they've wrestled with these things, that they've had to go through those questions, and not just act like you'll get over it.
Right,
yeah. We can only do that if we develop relationships with these young people.
Mentorship, yeah.
And by mentorship, you mean? Someone
that can walk alongside youth and just listen and just be open to hearing their ideas and their doubts, and not judging them for that.
So specifically a ministry that would connect people who've been through that, regardless of what generation they were in, who can be respected and guidance sought from and accepted from conversations with young people.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. What would you say to encourage a person who has been victimized by the church, yet feels called to leadership, but feels like church hurt is something or a barrier that's not allowing them to enter ministry?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's anything I can say or that anybody can say that gets them there until we deal with the actual hurt. That conflict resolution oftentimes is just skipped over. I'm not sure we can get over those hurdles until people have come together over that. Whether it's and not always are people still here, right? Sometimes it's historical and we need to address that. So I think that it would take specific action for us, and it seems like that would be a program that we could offer with some thought and some resources.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what does that look like?
That's one of the things. I don't know what it looks like, but there are people who would. I've known in my life a lot of people who have left specifically because somebody hurt them. They leave because of people, and then they give up on God because of that. And that's the most harmful piece of that in my mind. So that's kind of a twofold reason for us to address this.
It's interesting how you said, I'm going to paraphrase this, but people more so may not be hurt by the church, but they're hurt by the people. I think people can put leaders on pedestals sometimes, and I mean that's an issue in itself. But it's important to remember, God didn't hurt me. The people of the church hurt me. And
that's really what the church is, right? It's the people, and we all, I think, have to be in a place of service so that we recognize when we're doing a disservice to the community that we have chosen to be part of. And that's really where the church growth, I think, comes from, is when people that are here because they want to be here, not because they believe the same way, but because they want to be here with this group of people who care. And people then are attracted to that.
Yeah.
I can talk about Marie a bit. Marie was one of those who was attracted to this church by us being right about things. But what's kept her for all of these years is not that we're right, but it's the people, it's the relationships, it's the family that has grown out of this church. That's what keeps us all together, not just knowing we can have a common belief that we're sure of.
Could I ask what your view is on why young people are leaving Adventism?
I don't know that's right, but I can tell you what I think. I think that people leave because they're looking for something that they are not getting. And so they keep looking. If people are not having their needs met where they are, they're going to look someplace else to have their needs met. And I think that as a community, we often confuse this doctrine for meeting people's needs, and that's important, but it isn't what people are looking for. It's not what young people are looking for. It's not what older people that are going through crisis in their life are looking for. It's not what lonely old people are looking for. They're looking for a community. They're looking for people who care, not only people who say they care, but people who demonstrate that they care. I think that that's why people leave at whatever stage of life they're in when they leave. It's because their needs are not being met. I think that part of the answer to that is to have a culture in our church where people know that their voice will be heard so that people will recognize their needs. And then we as a community have to figure out how are we going to meet those needs within the confines of a church, but we are really a community of believers whose main role here, in my view, is to take care of each other.
Be a family.
Be a family. It's why God told us so many times to take care of the widows and orphans and the strangers at thy gate. Take care of all the people who aren't privileged like you're privileged. It's such an important thing. And when we neglect that, we neglect people. And when we neglect them, they're going to go somewhere else to find what their needs have been neglected.
It's important to create the space, but then not only create the space, but invest in that space.
Space is going to get filled by something.
Right.
So we can create a space. If we don't fill it, something else will. And
that's
so
good.
if we want to have the leadership of that, if you will, then we have to figure out how to fill that space with what it is they need. Maybe sometimes it's just a word of encouragement. Maybe it's a lot more than that. Maybe it's a place where they can express their doubts and they can work out the things that they're struggling with in their life. Sometimes it's a helping hand. All of those things are things that become barriers if we ignore the plea. So we not only have to open space, but we have to hear that plea and figure out a way to answer that.
I don't think I had thought of it like that. Thank you. Thank you so much for answering my questions today.
It's been good to talk with you.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this.
Yes, thank you.
Now I'm going to make you talk more in board meetings.
No.